Well, it is a joy for me to be here. I've heard so many good things about this community from AJ, and it's my privilege to be able to join you. As we open the scriptures together, let me ask God's blessing on our time. Creator God, the one who sustains us, we ask that you would speak to us now. And we thank you that we arrive here this morning, Lord, as your daughters and your sons. And would you give us a vision for how you would like to use our lives in the world? And toward that end, Lord, I pray that you pour through me the gift of teaching, that everything said here be from you and because of you and guiding us towards you as we partner with you to bring about your preferred future for all of creation. And we ask it in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, we're going to spend a little bit of time later in John 12, but I'm going to talk to you about my other passion first, which is movies. I watch a lot of movies. I hate to say that we're in November now, and I've probably seen about 250 movies this year. Is that a lot? I actually started with a friend of mine who used to be on staff with us, a new podcast this year called Sacred Frames, where we just walk through movies, popular movies. But I'm gonna talk to you about a movie that I watched a few years ago that I did not like at all. It's not a very good movie, but it has something instructional to say. And it's this movie right here, The Age of Adaline. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this movie. It did not do well at the box office. Not many people have seen it. And if you were to see it, you would know why not many people have seen it and why it didn't do well at the box office. It's about this woman, Adaline. And Adaline was the first baby born in San Francisco on New Year's Day in 1908. And she grows up, she gets married, she gives birth to a daughter, and she's widowed when her husband is killed in a construction accident building the Golden Gate Bridge in 1937. And then 10 months later, Adaline is driving through Northern California, and it's a stormy, dark night, and she runs her car off the road into a ravine and dies. But at the very moment she dies, a lightning strike hits the water and revives her and brings her back to life. But not only that, because of this little miraculous moment, Adaline remains 29 years old for the rest of her life. Now, a lot of us like the idea of being 29 forever. Some of us have lied about being 29 forever. And that's why we do the Rico creams and try to dress cool and do all of the Pilates. I get it, we want to stay 29. But the problem for Adaline is that she can't get any older. But everyone that she knows and everyone that she loves does. And another problem is that no one else could possibly understand what's happened, why she's not getting older. After all, she doesn't even understand what's happened. And so what is she supposed to do when people start asking questions? Worse, when people start asking questions, what about all those people who want to find her and study her and figure out what's caused all this? I mean, if you could bottle up being 29 forever, you could make $1 billion. And so as her daughter grows up, Adaline has to make some decisions. So she travels the world, and she can only stay in certain places so long before people start asking questions. And she learns different languages and cultures. And whenever anyone starts to get too close to her, she has to move on to the next place. And this works for most of her life. Only she and her daughter know about it. Until she meets a man named Ellis. And Ellis is wealthy and tall and good looking, Like, I watched this movie and I thought, I would fall for him. But when she meets Ellis, she doesn't tell him that her name is Adeline. She tells him that her name is Jenny. And so all the things that typically happen in a movie happen. And finally, Ellis wants to introduce Jenny to her parents, to his parents. And so they go off to his family's weekend house so Jenny can meet his parents. And as soon as Adeline walks through the door, standing at the end of the hallway is Harrison Ford. And he turns around and looks at her and says, Adeline. And Adeline explains that she's really Jenny, and the woman that he knew as Adeline was her mother, who recently deceased. But it's so uncanny because what had actually happened was 40 years ago in London, Adeline and Ellis's dad had met and fallen in love. And I told you, it was not a great movie. I wasn't lying. And he was getting ready to propose to her, and she sniffed it out, and she had to leave. But he can't shake this feeling that she is Adeline. And so he goes back and looks through old photo albums, and finally he confronts her about it, and she confesses that she doesn't really know what happened, but she is Adeline, and she's got to leave now because everything's about to be exposed. So she writes a goodbye note to Ellis and leaves it in the house while Ellis is away. She runs out, hops in the car, drives away. A few minutes later, Ellis shows up. He asks his dad, where's Jenny? He said, she's left. Ellis runs up the stairs to her room, finds this note, he reads it, runs back down the stairs, and asks his dad, like, what happened? She left. Ellis goes and gets in his car, and his dad stops him, and he said, Ellis, she can't. She can't what? She can't change. Now, the reason she can't change is that she can't die, and Adeline can't change, and she can't die, and twice now, that means she can't be loved. Now, that's the whole sermon, but I'm going to keep talking for a while. So you just hold on to that if you want, or you could make your grocery list. But I just want to spend some time thinking together about how people change. And have you ever considered the possibility that it is your ability to change that is your ability to connect and to grow? That without the ability to die in all its literal and figurative senses, you cannot grow. You cannot change. Now, I have 2 daughters. The oldest is a senior preparing for law school. She's a senior at the University of Texas. We're in the middle of all of that. And the youngest is a freshman at Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas. And they remind me and their mother that we are dying all the time. My wife, Rochelle, and I were watching a movie a couple of months ago. And it's a movie from our childhood, probably one that our parents liked and watched a lot. And I said to her, do you realize that everyone in this film is dead? Like the whole cast is dead. And that's just sort of where we are in life. Our moms call us. And they talk to us about people who are our teachers, our Sunday school teachers, folks from church, that they think we remember all of these people, and we don't. About how they are sick and how they are dying. We're just in a time of death. And then there are other deaths. I used to run. I used to be a runner. And I had to stop that several years ago when I was diagnosed with arthritis in both feet and both hands. And I woke up yesterday with a really bad muscle pull in my left ankle, and I have no idea why. And it only gets worse. For years, when I was living in Temple, Texas, which is a small town, every Thursday, I would go and deliver the Bible lesson at a little geriatric daycare. And it was really a day for the caregivers to have a few hours off. So they would drop off the people that they were caring for, and they would marshal them to the front, and they would sit in rows, and they would say the Pledge of Allegiance and do chair yoga and little things where they clap their hands, and someone would come and tell them a story. It was like kindergarten. And I thought, this is amazing. Because every one of these women and men at one point had a life that was active and powerful and beautiful. They loved well. They accomplished things. Life is a series of death of all kinds, big ones and small ones. One of my favorite theologians said that life is a series of surrenders. And maybe think about it this way. When you love someone, you surrender something. Maybe it's the ability to be wherever you want to be, whenever you want to be there. Maybe it's the way that you spend your money or your time. You could surrender attention you give to other things. We surrender the ability to do what we want when we want to do it. And then as we get older, we surrender our minds. My mother-in-law is slowly slipping away into dementia. And there are things that we just don't tell her about life because we know that we would just have to tell her again in 10 minutes. And then ultimately, there is the final surrender. And the question is never whether or not life will make us surrender. The question is how we'll receive it. And so I started thinking about this a lot several years ago when I read Ronald Rolheiser's book, The Paschal Mystery. And in the Paschal Mystery, he talks about transformation and change this way. He says the Paschal Mystery is a process of transformation within which we are given both new life and new spirit. It begins with suffering and death, moves on to the reception of new life, spends some time grieving the old and adjusting to the new. And finally, only after the old life has been truly let go of, is new spirit given for the life we are already living. And so what Rolheiser is saying is that this is the pattern of life. And I didn't grow up in church like maybe some of you. I didn't grow up in churches that dealt much with what AJ was talking about with the Christian calendar. So I may have missed this rhythm of life that for centuries has been built in. But this idea that life does have this rhythm to it, and you might be in any of these stages at any given time, and in different arenas of your life, you might be in various stages. And it starts like this. This is what Rolheiser says. It starts with Good Friday. The loss of life, a real death. Not necessarily a literal death like of a friend or a spouse or a family member, but something that you have come to love and come to be very meaningful to you actually dies. It goes away. And there are many of those in life. But that death gives rise to Easter Sunday, which is the reception of new life. And we can celebrate new life, but that leads us into the 40 days. And those 40 days is a time of readjustment. We have to embrace the new, and we have to grieve the old. And for many of us, grieving a part of our life that has slipped away is the hardest part. Because what the human mind wants to do is when there is a loss, We want to reorient and recalibrate as soon as humanly possible to find some level ground to stand on. And so we want to skip over the grieving part. But you have to go through it to experience ascension, which is letting go of the old and letting it bless you. Rolheiser also calls this the refusal to cling. And then that leads to Pentecost, the reception of new spirit for the new life that one is already living. It is the acceptance of what is. And that's receiving the new spirit. And we're in different places on that journey. And I remember so clearly when our oldest daughter was preparing to leave for college. Because what you don't know about me is that for years, my wife and I struggled with infertility. As a matter of fact, 3 months before we got married, she'd gone to the doctor where they do all the blood and all the poking and all of that. And the doctor had said, you will probably never be able to have children. And so we worked through that for years. So when Malia was born, she was like this miracle child to us. And she was leaving. And she wasn't grieving leaving like we were grieving leaving. She was more in the celebration aspect of it. But this version of our family, where all 4 of us had been together under one roof, like that was dying. And so my poor church had to just watch me grieve for a year and talk about it for a year. Because one of my great mentors, she's a fabulous teacher, she said, it's a big deal and nobody talks about it. And so I just decided to talk about it. Those days were dying. And she was off in Austin, which is about 2.5, 3 hours away. And I was going there to visit because I was speaking at a conference. And so I called her up and I said, Malia, I'm gonna be in Austin on these days. Let's get together because there's nothing that a college student loves more than a parent with a credit card. And she says, well, I'm busy all day, but I can see you that night. And so I'm at this conference and I'm speaking, and out in the back lobby, I see Malia walk in. And the entire day she had spent with her friends and sorority doing service projects, and she walked in with just this incredible confidence. And I realized this is a different child than the one that we left here. This past Easter, I was asked to come on a radio talk show in Houston to talk about the Paschal Mystery. And it's hosted by 3 hosts. They have 3 hosts, and 2 of them definitely did not want me there. But one of them was a local weatherman who had been forced to retire about 8 months before. And he was the one that was kind of most antagonistic to me being here. And I just walked him through what I just walked you through about the Paschal Mystery. And because he had been let go after over 25 years of service to the Houston community, like he was the one that asked all the questions. Because his question was like, is this just for Christians or is this good for anybody? And I said, all you have to do is live, and this is good for everybody. This is the Paschal Mystery. And it happens with every relationship, marriage, with our health, virtually everything. Surrendering well is a process of dying, grieving, letting go, and embracing the new. And we struggle with that. Because you've seen people who won't let go of something that's past. You've seen parents who have told their kids, you're gonna go to only these schools, or you're gonna go into the family business. This is what Rolheiser would call clinging to the past. And when we cling to the past, we cannot receive the new thing that God is doing in our world and in our lives. Because we think like we've got it. So about the same time that I was reading Ronald Rolheiser's book, The Paschal Mystery, I was reading Bono's book called Surrender. And I'm not a big U2 fan, but so many people told me, you need to read Surrender, you need to read Surrender, you need to read Surrender. Not yet. And it's 40 songs, 40 stories about 40 songs. And I was captivated by this one about his relationship with Michael Hutchence. Now, if you're like me and you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you remember the band INXS, and Michael Hutchence was the lead singer for INXS. And in it, Bono tells a story about he and his wife's relationship with Michael Hutchence and his wife, Helena, and how they had been friends for a long time, but because of some of Michael and Helena's behaviors, they broke off the friendship. And Bono talks about how he regrets that because Michael began to spiral and he and Helena separated and Helena wouldn't let Michael see their kids. And then one Sunday morning, he got word that in Australia, Michael Hutchence had died by suicide. And so he wrote this song about how he was feeling about it. And Bono says in the song, Bono says in the book that it's not a very generous song. It's not a kind song, but this is how he was feeling at the moment. And he says, you've got to get yourself together. You've got stuck in a moment, and now you can't get out of it. Don't say that later will be better. Now you're stuck in a moment, and you can't get out of it. So Bono is warning us of the same thing that the Paschal Mystery is teaching us. That our choices are to die to the past and grow, or to get stuck. In John 12, we are given 4 stories that reflect the ups and downs of life. In the first story, Mary anoints Jesus' feet, which is a very up time for Jesus. This is the announcement that Jesus is king, that he is the anointed one. But in the very next story is the plot to kill Lazarus, which is a very down time for Jesus, that there is a plot to kill one of his friends. And then the third story is Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And then we get this story. Among the crowds traveling to Jerusalem were Greeks seeking to follow God and worship at the great feast. Some of them came to Philip with an important question. The Greeks say, "Sir, we're hoping to meet Jesus." Philip, a disciple from the Galilean village of Bethsaida, told Andrew that these Greeks wanted to see Jesus. Together, Andrew and Philip approached Jesus to inform him about the request. And Jesus says to them, "The time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you the truth. Unless a grain of wheat is planted in the ground and dies, it remains a solitary seed. But when it is planted, it produces in death a great harvest. The one who loves his life will lose it, and the one who despises it in this world will have life forevermore. Anyone who serves me must follow my path. Anyone who serves me will want to be where I am, and he will be honored by the Father. My spirit is low and unsettled. How can I ask the Father to save me from this hour? This hour is the purpose for which I have come into the world. But what I can say is this: Father, glorify your name." So this is what Jesus is teaching his disciples. That unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it just remains a solitary seed. But when it dies, it produces much fruit. And our instinct so often is to cling to the thing. Because no one wants death. No one likes change. But it is that ability to change, to become something new, that actually produces life and fruit. That we join God in God's purposes for the world. So I turned 51 last June, which means that my brother would have turned 54. We're 3 years apart, and 2 years ago, my brother died suddenly of a heart attack. And that's the kind of literal death where there is no replacing someone. But I remember sitting at his funeral and hearing story after story, mostly from young people in his church, about what he had come to mean to them and what he had come to aspire in them. That he was such a great servant of that church. As a matter of fact, that church, since that time, has created an award named after my brother for the volunteer who I guess volunteers the hardest. I don't know exactly how you do that. But every year, someone gets an award named after my brother. It's an invitation to love and serve your church and community well. And they were meeting in a school at the time, saving up money to build a facility where they could worship. And a few months ago, they broke ground on that building. And the pastor called my sister-in-law, and she said, "Do you still have some of Richard's ashes?" Because what had happened is my brother started as a volunteer in the sound booth. But because they were meeting in a school, he was having to get to the school like at 5 a.m, do all of the setup, wire everything. They would have their couple services, and then they would have to tear everything down. So he would leave like at 4:45 in the morning and not get home until 3 or so in the afternoon. And my sister-in-law, Stephanie, said, "Enough of that." So he started serving as a greeter. He'd show up a little bit later and leave a little bit sooner. And so as they were breaking ground right at the threshold of the church, they decided that they wanted to leave some of my brother's ashes. So just like always, no one could come in that church without encountering Richard. Jesus is teaching us that in order for God to do the next beautiful and powerful thing in your life, some parts of who you are today must die. And maybe for you, that's an old way of relating to a partner or a former partner or a child or a parent. Maybe it's letting go of the idea that you should have the same body that you had 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe it's a belief or a thought about yourself that someone handed you years ago and you've clung on to. Maybe it's the death of your youth. Maybe it's the death of a dream. You're just never gonna play pro baseball. And all of us resist our surrenders. But what if the resistance to our surrenders is what's keeping God from doing the next great thing in our lives? What if the greatest defense against the next move of God is us clinging to the last move of God? It's when a seed falls to the ground and dies that it produces much fruit. So how might you do that? Here are some ways to get started. First, you have to name your deaths. What parts of your life aren't coming back? And just be clear about that. Be honest. And then claim your births. Remember all of those times that God has come through for you when you thought everything was falling apart. Just this last week, when I was worried very much about some things that my family is going through right now, I just made a list of all of the times that God came through. Claim those births. And 3, grieve what you have lost and adjust to a new reality. Then 4, don't cling to the old. Like, let it ascend and bless you. Thank God for it and the time you had with it. And then finally, accept the spirit of the life you are living. That you have changed and you can change, and God can change you. You're not supposed to be 29 forever. You are supposed to love and be loved and be real. And that is how your life can echo long after you're gone. Let me pray for you. God, thank you for the way that you change us, even when we are not thankful for the ways that you change us. Let us receive, Lord, that you are doing a mighty work in us. That doesn't always look good or feel comfortable, but let us see you in it, and that we would receive you well. And we ask it in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.